Hello and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and as always, I'm joined by Mike Smith, award-winning director Brian Redondo, and Savon Jones, aka Captain Bonnie. This is episode 24, and on today's show, we talk about the season finale of Invincible, perhaps the best show on streaming right now. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund. Nice, well said.
Good point.
Let's move on to Invincible, which is Amazon's show. We talked about this on one of our previous pods, but we've had a chance now to see the end of season 1 for some of us. Mike actually came around to it. He heard our last pod, and he was like, you know what?
Say came
That
around.
Sounds like a good show. No, just let me tell the narrative, so let me create this picture here.
Paint the picture.
It doesn't have to
Sorry.
be reality.
Let me shut up.
God.
So we were so compelling in the way that we talked about Invincible that Mike was like, you know what? I got to watch that show. It's the It Show. I'm seeing it on Reddit. People are talking about it. It's in the memes. I better keep up with the Joneses here. So
Got on the
Mike
hype
started
train.
watching it.
That's my
Yeah.
Wi-Fi name.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
That works.
Oh my
that
God.
works.
So corny.
So spoilers are certainly incoming, but since Mike has only watched the first couple, we'll get his thoughts on what we talked about last week, helped inform him and how he's kind of interpreting the show right now or feeling about the show.
It's really good. I mean, I think honestly, it wasn't anything specific anyone said about it, but it was just there's such a common thread of everyone.
You're killing the
saying,
narrative here, man. We were trying to build a thing. You're supposed to be like, Brian really sold me. And okay.
Well, no, you did. I mean, I think the fact is I trust y'all's opinion, and when everybody was saying it's just really the overall quality of the show. That's what sold me on what y'all were saying. It's not the individual things. It's just every superhero show has its own kind of lens, and they all kind of do their thing. And we're at a point where it's it's just an infinitely long Venn diagram, where each show shares at least one aspect with another show. So I'm not going to rehash what y'all said, but it's just I think my main point, and I texted y'all this yesterday, is the tone of it is crazy. It's really weird to me that it works. It's Brian put it, as always, put it better than I could. It was it's the ultra violence combined with teen melodrama combined with the Harley Quinn-esque run of the mill, everybody's just kind of going about their business with all this crazy stuff happening. Somehow they're able to pull it off, and a lot of the show is in earnest, and we haven't really gotten that outside of the MCU, and we're seeing the MCU can even miss with that now, but it's just that tone is so weird that it works, but it works, and it's consistently so good. I really don't it's just baffling to me that the show is so entertaining with how weird it is, and not to spoil it for any. Well, can I spoil it? The end of the first episode.
Hey, bro, you
we told
only
him
2
that
episodes
they-
in.
So it's so weird that in the first episode they run the credits and then there's 10 minutes after, and it's the most it's the most impactful
so
10
confusing.
minutes. But the fight of Omni-Man killing all the people, I was sitting there with my mouth wide open.
Yeah, just
genuinely
There's so
shocked.
many jaw drop moments on the show.
And it's really dramatic. That's almost it's has the same tone as Anakin turning into Darth Vader and killing everybody, but it's also that really weird, crazy ultra violence. But then
visceral.
they do really small things really well. The world building is really sick. The little secret army thing with the invisible guys, and then they come in with all the gear and stuff. I'm what how are you have so much time to flesh everything out? And the last thing I'll say is, I said this when I was reading it, but every character, no matter how small, is an absolute heavy hitter. It's actually so weird that they have and I said
Are you talking about the
voice
talent
actors?
or the characters themselves?
No, the voice actors. I don't know anything about the characters, but My favorite bit so far is when he has to fight the guy on the moon or whatever, and it turns out he just has a typo. And I was like, I recognize that voice. And I was like, that's fucking Seth Rogen. Like,
that was Seth Rogen.
Yes.
Yeah, dude.
I realized that last.
I'm telling you, like every scene, click up on the remote just so you can see
I didn't
who's
click
who.
that one. Oh, I'm so
Like
dumb.
John Hamm has this recurring guy. I said I wasn't going to talk about it for a long time, but it's just so cool.
Who's John?
Who's John Hamm on the show?
The security guard guy in the beginning who has the son.
That's
the
John
emo
Hamm.
son,
Oh,
that's John Hamm, dude. Yeah, Jason Mantzoukas is actually the only one I kind of don't mess with, just because it's like I can only hear him as like chaotic, the guy from the League or whatever. But like every single, I don't get like
Jillian Jacobs. I realized last night.
Dude, Zazie Beetz is great. Like all of the everybody in there is just huge. I don't really get how they're working, but it's all good performances. So it's just
and naturally, J.K. Simmons just
yeah,
God tier.
and like so weird like for that, right? Like you wouldn't. I guess it does make sense, but like and Sandra Oh, and then obviously Steven Yeun is just like absolutely crushing. I still don't know how to pronounce.
We'll talk about
it.
him at the end, but geez, his season finale VA work was just top notch.
Yeah, I think he's the standout.
I've never seen anything like this where it's like chaotic and like funny and tongue in cheek, but also really earnest. Like it really feels like new ground, and it's just like it's really refreshing. So like, subverted the
Guardians
superhero
of the
genre.
Galaxy was kind of like that. I mean, it's not the same.
Yeah,
but
no,
you could
but
kind of describe that as like chaotic and earnest and a little bit nuts
missing
all
the
at the same
ultra
time.
violence.
Yeah, but
and
like
you're not having like
Yeah, the stakes weren't as high.
Yeah.
I feel like. Or you
But
didn't feel them as much as you do in this show, I think.
honestly, let's keep it a buck. This show, despite the campy aesthetic, is not campy in terms of how its characters interact, and that's the biggest thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has a campy aesthetic, but not campy character interactions. When characters talk, they don't speak in cliches. When they're talking, these are like conversations that you could really see yourself having with your actual friends and family and peers. You just happen to be doing it in a world with interdimensional aliens and superheroes. But that's really hard to pull off compared to, Guardians, which is campy, but they embrace the camp on all fronts.
It's like not truly whimsical in the way things happen, like with the army coming back and back like through those portals, and then they have to go back, and then they come back, and then they figure out like the time loop kind of stuff. Like that would never happen in Guardians, and like all this like crazy stuff like that. So it's just, I don't know. Is this like, when did the comic come out? Like I don't really understand the context of all this.
So the comic's been out for a decent amount of time. Brian, you already said it. Same
5
dude
to
who did The
10
Walking
years,
Dead.
maybe?
Yeah, a lot of Walking Dead alum are on the show. Like a lot. But
Yeah, Glenn.
yeah, but the
Yeah.
biggest thing I've heard is, one, a lot of the people who actually, I guess the executive producers are people who, the writer with the comic is deeply involved in the creative process.
Yes.
So one
That's
thing
good.
that's encouraging is that he has said on record that he wasn't happy with maybe how the writing and ending of the actual comic run had gone.
Oh, is
and
it
wants
done?
To take, the
The
comic's
comic?
been finished for a while. So if you're really starving for more content, you can read it. I'm not going to
No.
read it. I'm going to try my best.
Read
because,
when I could watch? What, are you out of your mind?
No, but what I've heard is that he wasn't happy with how he did some of the ending and some of the writing.
I'll let y'all talk about the end, but it's just like, if anybody like listening hasn't seen it, I implore you to watch it. It's just high quality. There's
That's
really
a
no
confidently
other way to
wrong bump.
Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah,
It's
well,
greenlit
there you
for
go. It's
season
like
2 and 3.
We out here,
right after,
big
it's like
swinging.
it consistently happens. We talk about it, things happen. We're the deep state.
Confidently
of-
wrong,
Warrior
approved,
renewed.
Stamp it. Renewed.
All right, I'm gonna take
Invincible,
my headphones
greenlit.
off because now I'm invested. But y'all can talk. about
Okay,
it.
we'll text you when we're done. And this will still contain spoilers now for the last few episodes of the run. Where we're left at the end not knowing what's happening with Omni-Man, right? Like he disappears, and that sets up what should happen in season 2 and 3. How did you guys feel about the last episode? For me, I was like, man, this is my favorite episode so far. It was not the most comfortable episode, but it was my most favorite. I thought, like, you were mentioning, like, Steven Yeun's, like, work, and I thought Sandra Oh, I was, like, tearing up in certain places just because of how deeply you could see how hurt they were finding all of this stuff out that we knew as the audience, so we shouldn't have been shocked. But I think what they did really well was show you what Nolan's choice had his effect on his family, and how that had shattered and broken them in places that the actors just made so accessible to us just through their voices, right? Like
Oh yeah.
the cartoon drawing doesn't
felt
allow
it.
you to doesn't really allow you to see that on their faces,
Yeah.
and yet it comes through in their voices. And so
It
just
almost
what a
didn't
phenomenal
match,
job
right?
there.
Like the animation wasn't at the level of emotion as the voice acting. In
And
some
it still just hits
But
you
it
like
still
super
resonated.
hard.
Yeah.
And just the little like spittle though, like coming out of Mark.
Just when he's on the mountain, just like he just coughed a little bit of blood to come out his face.
Yeah,
He got gashed.
that choice was like there. The animation really did play a role, and I think how I felt about it. But, anyways, what did you guys feel about it? That's the only part I wanted to say. That I just thought that like they deserve all the kudos, all the flowers. That just those, especially those two actors.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think the whole family dynamic really pays off in the final fight between Omni-Man and Invincible. You know, like when you hear Mark just like whimper out like "Dad," like that sort of moment while he's getting pummeled to death by his own father, is really shocking and like dismaying, but also intriguing all at the same time. And then when Omni-Man is saying like the most outlandish things that you would never want to hear a parent say, things like your mother's like a pet to me. What an insanely intense and like perverted thing to say to your kid. And then hearing Steve Ewan, hearing Mark react to that and try to like, convince himself and convince his dad that this is not you. So this, all of this is wrong, but like I know I also have to stop you, and I'm trying to kind of understand like what's going on and process everything that you're telling me now, because you're flipping my world upside down.
But J.K. Simmons,
incredible.
even the way he delivers it is so unique, right? You could have overplayed that and turned him into a really like a villain of like the 10th degree, right? Or like the 100th degree by just making him sneer it, right? Like you sniveling humans, right? Like we've seen that version of that villain thousands of times, right? Like the is it Hera, the sister of Hela, the sister of like
Thor,
of Loki and Thor, right?
Yeah.
She has that like just sneering like disdain for humankind. Loki does that in Avengers, but it's not that way, right? For Omni-Man, you can really feel that the way he delivers it is very different, but the same. Like it's the same
he's
words.
Conflicted, and he's also a little bit more matter of fact too, right? Like he doesn't seem.
It's not that sneering,
Yeah.
like just condescension. It's just like, oh, you don't matter, like what?
So one thing the show does throughout the season that I really have kind of noticed as a theme, and I hope to continue this theme, is the idea of perception of time. And they do like, so with Red Rush, the speedster character, they have a throwaway line about how time is super, super dilated to him. So, and it's obviously meant to drive home his death at Omni-Man's hands. Like, yo, that was like for a second, but for him, that was awful. And then you have these interdimensional aliens who come into the dimension, but their time is so different that seconds feel like years and they age out, and there's a whole bit with that. And then you go to the character, the Immortal, who is implied to just have lived ridiculous amounts of lifetimes. And then you have Omni-Man, who is functionally immortal relative to us. And, that line really hits home when he tells Mark, this has been a speck in my lifetime. You don't know me. Like, it was an interesting take, because as cruel and sadistic and evil as he is, to us, it makes sense. Like, there is a sense, it's more of a nihilistic, it feels more like a just matter-of-fact nihilism than a cruel, I'm here to make y'all suffer, even though he is actively doing that. And it's a weird, it doesn't make him like, good, or, it doesn't make him, it's just a very interesting take on that, because it's a different brand of evil and callousness. It's more of a I don't know, it was just very interesting to see him just so casually really just stepping on humans like ants and not even giving it a moment's thought. But you're like, yeah, dude's 500 hundreds of years old. This really ain't diddly to him.
Right. It's his perspective is relative to his circumstances.
Yeah.
He thinks he's doing something benevolent, and we've seen other villains do something or have that same kind of mindset, but but in the grand scheme of how he's looking at the universe, these things are in some ways insignificant, and you can kind of imagine that. And so like when he says to Mark, like, I could just make another one of you, what's that? It's like another
17
17
years.
years, and that's nothing to him. But for somebody who's gonna live for thousands of years or something, that could kind of be understandable. And it's such an interesting, nuanced take, and it's all part of this kind of crazy world within Invincible, or crazy universe within Invincible, that I think makes it like really shine.
One thing about this episode, I'll say, and Wes, this is kind of building on you saying not the most comfortable, even though it was your favorite. I'm someone who I'm not really bothered by like violence and gore. This show, that episode made me visibly uncomfortable multiple times. And I really was trying to think of, why is this hitting differently than other stuff? I've seen plenty of shows where people get blown to bits and murdered and killed and all of this. And I don't know, maybe y'all can help me answer this, but what is it about this show that's making it hit home different in a way that other shows haven't, especially for an animated one? Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think part of it is they're not just doing it for the shock and awe value. They're really doing it to show just how high the stakes are, how severe the damage is, like how much pain there is for the protagonist, for the main characters, but then also to get us to think about what kind of damage are super powered beings able to even accomplish, right? And so I think they, with Mark being used as like a weapon against the train coming through, and all the passengers being maimed as they're running through Mark, that level of violence, it's not just to freak us out. It's also to show like, oh, these are everyday people who are now becoming kind of like helpless victims to such a catastrophe, to such an act of terror. I think because we're kind of invested in the individual characters, and we know that Mark feels the pain of all those people who are suffering and dying as a result of the fight. We as an audience also feel that sting. And other shows don't do that. Other shows, kind of treat violence kind of callously, and they're like, well, look at the crazy maiming that we can do to this character, or something like that. But I think kind of a good analogy in some ways is Game of Thrones. Not all the violence in Game of Thrones. I think some of it in Game of Thrones is kind of excessive, but some of it is also very poignant. Like when the entire Stark family got murdered at the Red Wedding, like it was super extreme, but it also kind of told you like where this series is at and what's at stake. Like the people that you love on the show can die. The heroes will die, and die in awful ways too. And I think something similar is going on here with Invincible, even though I think it's a more earnest show.
For me, maybe it didn't bother me more than other things of violence, but I do think when the innocent, like the civilians, not call them innocents, the civilians are getting just obliterated in their fight, I think there's just so many layers there. One, it's like you're not used to seeing the collateral damage in superhero fights, and it's not that other shows haven't done that, right? Like Batman v Superman talks about that quite a bit, but there's an aspect of like, you're used to seeing like cars fly out everywhere, but like the people scatter before the cars actually land on them, right? And that doesn't happen here. There's a feeling of futility when he's trying to save the mom and
The kid,
the daughter,
the
right, in the building. And not only does he not save them, you'd have to imagine now, given what we saw right before that like the whole building is filled with people. And so these are not the only two people that he didn't save. There's actually maybe hundreds of people in this building that he didn't save. And there wasn't any way for him to save them anyways. And so there's this like futility of he has no choices here that actually work out.
Yeah, I guess it's like Omni-Man is so powerful that like no matter what Invincible wants to do intention-wise, Omni-Man's powerful enough to impose his will to where you aren't going to be able to save these people, and you trying to save it is gonna backfire, because now Omni-Man's gonna actively try, and like when he saved the guy in the jet, and the dude was like, oh, I almost made it, and the Omni-Man just makes a point of like, okay, well, now I'm gonna kill him specifically because you saved them, to really drive this home. And like, because those deaths really like hit me hard, because you see big characters die all the time.
Oh yeah,
But
the
I
fighter
was just
pilot.
but watching Omni-Man just do it so casually, when the people after the subway, when he steps on the rock and it's just a person beneath it, and it's like a kid with a magnifying glass, and it was, shout out to them, because I think a lot of that can end up being shock value that you end up wanting to watch for the blood and gore. But when I tried to rewatch that episode, I was still visibly uncomfortable. Like, I was just sitting there just actively cringing. But if anything, that's a testament to how well they did it, because clearly they want you to be uncomfortable, and because you want there to be a way that the heroes can save things and save the day. It's like, yo, dude, Omni-Man is like the boss right now. People are gonna die. The question is how many, and that's kind of, I think that's a hard pill to swallow when you still think about the tone and nature of the show and all these fun, fantastic characters.
Yeah,
I think we're also like hopeful that Omni-Man is gonna have a Darth Vader moment where he comes around and becomes Anakin again, right? Like, you're still holding out hope, and yet he continues to do these things that are, unspeakable. And he's convinced that like this is actually what he needs to do to teach Mark this lesson, right? And so there's all these things around like, God, this guy is so messed up, and yet, like you said, we have enough context now for what his life is like when he explains to Mark like this is what it is on Viltrum, that like you're like, oh, I see why you think about things this way, and to you this makes total sense. Omni-Man doesn't feel bad for these people that are dying on the subway at all, right? Like, that's not in his register of things that he should think, and yet we do think that he should have that already, right? He's been on Earth for this long. He knows how people feel, and he can somewhat relate to them. I don't think he fully relates, obviously, but and he just still doesn't.
Much like Mark, because again, where a lot of us we're seeing is from, we don't know Omni-Man's life. We just know Mark's life.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know him. That's what this episode really drove home. And when he said,
well, I think we know him
me,
more now. I think we know him more now.
Like, we know him, but we don't know him at the same time.
Yeah, we have to question everything we've seen.
Yeah, like now we know him in the sense of he's revealed his true nature, but now it also means that, we don't even really know what that true nature is. We just know that it's malevolent. And that's, like, that makes sense. If someone's hundreds of years old and you've only known them for 17 years and that's all you've known, you don't know that person.
We're trying to understand Omni-Man now, knowing this new context. And Omni-Man himself shows kind of like different motives during the course of the episode, right? Like, he wants to do what's right for Viltrum. He also thinks they're going to be sort of benevolent masters to the Earth and bring prosperity and health and peace and all of that. He's also trying to teach Mark a lesson about not taking this seriously and not being prepared and, not being a good Viltrumite. And so he's punishing Mark and making a point at the same time. But then he's also grappling with what Mark is telling him, that, hey, you're my dad. Like, I know you're not this. And we see it in the flashback with Nolan, with Omni-Man, thinking about the time when Sandra Oh's character had to kind of bring him back down to Earth level and look at his own son, as a being that he would love and care for, as a human and not as a Viltrumite. And so I think all those things Omni-Man is grappling with, and he ultimately leaves. He doesn't finish the job with.
And we don't know what
Mark.
kind of pressure he's on from Viltrum. We haven't seen any of his communications with that, right? Maybe he is also having not issues. Maybe there is some sort of communication and pressure there as well, or expectation there that he's feeling.
Yeah. So he might be a deserter.
Well, we know what he did was unprecedented. Like, they really drove that home. Like,
oh, yeah. With the investigator coming in.
Yeah, they drove home
inspector.
that what Omni-Man did was something that has never happened. Like whoa, like
right.
The dude was visibly like, what? That don't make a lick of sense. That's like a tiger running away from a steak. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? So it'll be interesting. One thing I want to say with Invincible, I want us to talk about a little bit, because we've talked a lot about Omni-Man and him. I'm really excited for when they said, hey, what's next? And they just pointed out all these other side arcs.
Oh, that was so dope.
Because I'm just so excited, because those are just going to be fun things to watch happen as we clearly wait for whatever happens with the Viltrumites. the Mars storyline, Battle Beast still being in play, Titan, the Underground dude.
Yeah, who were the underground dudes? I don't remember that.
He was the guy who was fighting Eve and him in the mountains, and he was bouncing around with his side gloves. And he fell into the crater.
Right.
But I'm really excited for how they're gonna do that, and the stuff with Cecil's character.
Wait, can I tell you my sister's theory on them?
With the Earth
with all
people?
the side characters? No, all the side characters.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I think I'm gonna agree with it. Go.
She thinks that they're gonna have to unite in order to fend off the Viltrum attack that's coming.
Good theory.
And that makes sense with Battle Beast. I think if you can get Battle Beast on your side and you can convince him that like, hey, you have a challenger that is worthy of your like time, then he would be into it. So that could work.
What I was thinking was that this whole season was about Mark being a little bit immature about becoming a hero, and wasn't prepared to face his father. Right. So now his dad leaves the picture. We'll see if Bronny James holds up. We'll see. So now his dad leaves the picture, and he's left to be the hero of Earth and face off against all these different threats that they kind of flash to. And okay. I feel like it's going to become a huge or a long drawn out training montage where he has to mature over time against all these other lesser threats to finally culminate in the Viltrumites coming to Earth and him having to deal with his father once again as a new person. That's my take.
I like the idea, though, of season 2 maybe being more around him trying to unite everybody or figuring out a way to do that, because they have made a big deal about family and team, especially through the Guardians of the Globe, but also just him and his mom, right? Like, and how they have to, like, just they are a family and they work together. And Adam Eve doesn't have that, right? And she's missing that. And Mark is sort of assembling his own little family, right? He's got now Amber on his side. He has Eve. He has the best friend. I forget his name, William or something. So I think it could be good if that, like, his maturation process in order to face his dad is not a physical one, but it's actually an exercise in leadership and how he's actually going to unite all of these different groups together, realizing that, like, the survival of Earth actually means the survival of all these other groups. And of course, they're not going to be into it at first. I don't know. So I think that
I like that. He's not going to be the same kind of hero.
He'll have to be invincible in spirit, not body.
He's going to be our Sam Wilson.
Honestly.
All right. Should we finish there? You got a closing thought?
My closing thought quickly is that what are the twins' name? Was it the Terror Twins? Not the Terror Twins. Why am I
the blue guys?
Mauler twins?
Dang, Mauler. Why am I getting That's from Young Justice. Sorry. The Mauler twins are dope, and they are going to get some type of redemption arc, and that's my theory. They clearly aren't malicious, and their technology is clearly super important, and I think their cloning technology is going to also be very important with moving forward in the plot. Because the show also established that no one's
blow up
equal.
their lab? Yeah, why did they blow up their lab and then get arrested? I didn't understand that. Maybe that's not the question for this. Let's just keep going.
Closing thought.
I'm
so happy this show got renewed, not just for the next season, but the next 2 seasons. And here's hoping that Amazon increases their budget
animation
fivefold so we can get some better freaking animation. Because some of it in that final episode were really shaky, and I could spot it every time. They need to get on par, at least, with The Legend of Korra. And beyond, because that show's old.
No, but I don't think they can now. Like, if you completely change the visual style of it, people are going to be like, this isn't
Well, you
the
can
same
still
show.
do the same style, but just have better animations. Like, you can still just have
see.
more frames and just more drawings per second. That's
Yeah,
purely...
I don't need to see the cutout float across the screen.
No, for what it's worth, I watched a YouTube video that was like talks about animation, good and bad animation for this YouTube channel, and they talked about how, like, the issues with that show are 100% time and budget. So literally, just if you have more money and time, it's just going to be objectively better.
I don't know. It might take you out of it. You might be like, this is not the show I'm used to watching.
I'm not going to be upset if they make the
off.
animations better.
Legend of Korra, it's dope for a reason.
Thanks.
All right, friends. Well, let's wrap up our show there. Hit us up on our social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, @confidently_pod. Leave us a comment, leave us a review, tell your friends about our show. If you're digging The Falcon and the Winter Soldier or you're digging Invincible, we all love the show, so we would love to talk to you about it. Just remember, Mike hasn't finished all of them yet, so don't spoil it for him. Don't forget to visit all of our sponsors like Amazon and Comfy, and of course, none of these people actually sponsor us, but we're going to get big one day, guys. One day. We're out.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.